But we became concerned because when I think the manager, at least from our perspective, the media perspective, where the manager is going to be asked to apologize for matters which come out of statements which were made by someone else, and matters which surprisingly were being called racist and otherwise, and instructions were being given for certain things to be done. I believe that, at least from my angle, I said we would wait for the Chief Minister to comment on how these matters should normally be handled and what he expects his staff and his people to do regarding such matters.
After we were in office just for a few months, we made sure that all sittings of the Legislative Council were made public and broadcast live on Radio Montserrat. Because it's important for the public to get an understanding of what is happening in their parliament. So we have always been of the view that the freedom of information is a right in a democratic society. In this second time around, and I think again it's a first, and I think perhaps even in the Caribbean, where we have offered the opposition en bloc a certain number of hours per month for them to utilize in broadcasting their messages to the public free of cost. We are of the view that persons must be in a position in any democratic society to hear varying points of view. Let me make it abundantly clear, however, the government of Montserrat does not promote, promulgate, or encourage any form of racism in Montserrat. I think we've gone beyond those days. But to say somebody is black or somebody is white, in my mind, is not a racist statement. Because when I look at a copy of the Herald of the 21st of November 2010, it states very clearly in the ad on the lost persons or missing persons, a lady missing, 5'9", white female. And right next to her was a gentleman who was missing, who was described as a black male. So therefore, black and white is considered as standard language. And I do not think that in the context of Mr. Brandt's statement, that in fact there was any racism involved. As it relates to how the matter has been dealt with since that time, I'd just like to say it may not have been dealt with in the most appropriate manner. But there are too many more important things for us in Montserrat to deal with than for us to be distracted by that matter. So I would like to say, and I want to make it abundantly clear, that whatever errors of judgment took place during that period, those errors of judgment are gone and past. There will be no recurrence of such errors of judgment, and the matter, in my mind, should now be put to rest. If, in fact, an individual has a concern with a statement made by Radio Montserrat, that individual must put in writing their concerns directly to the permanent secretary with responsibility for Radio Montserrat and copying it to the manager. There are other issues attendant to it which I do not wish to go into because, as I said, freedom of speech, freedom of expression is enshrined in the Constitution, it's enshrined in the United Nations Convention of Human Rights, and as such, Montserrat will in fact abide by the freedom of choice and the freedom of expression, which will also be aired on Radio Montserrat as long as people fall within the rules and the guidelines as established by the government of Montserrat. If a statement is knowingly inaccurate, Radio Montserrat must ensure that it is corrected or brought to the attention of the person who is dealing with it. If there are matters which the manager, in his opinion, feel are contentious in terms of being litigious, then he should draw that to the attention of government's legal advisor for advice before it is broadcast. And that's very clear. So we do not want to see a recurrence of what has happened in the past. I am now putting it to rest. And for those who are offended by it, because quite a number of locals have seen it in MNI Life and throughout, who were offended by it. I apologize on behalf of the government of Montserrat for the waste of time which took place in relation to this particular matter.
I think that the public out there would want to know what specifically you might be referring to in terms of what you're saying to put to rest the whole issue, that people do have the opportunity, nobody has to.
No, I am basically dealing with the raft of communication going back and forth between Radio Montserrat and various parts of government, and in relation to the matters which fall directly under the ministry for which I am being assigned. That's the office of the Chief Minister, and Radio Montserrat falls directly under my remit, and as such the directives which I give will be followed by Radio Montserrat. Nobody else has the authority to direct Radio Montserrat as to what to do and how to do it, unless of course it comes with the advice of the Permanent Secretary and ratified by either Executive Council or the Minister with responsibility.
You will admit that there's one other area where that we have, and it's been a long area of discussion or topic of discussion, and where Radio Montserrat staff are public servants. Public servants are governed, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, by the governor and his office. What responsibility do they have, or what responsibility do you have and your staff would have to accessing or accepting directives and instructions from the governor?
Directives and instructions by the governor to a substantive ministry must be handled through the minister or the permanent secretary. As it goes in relation to day-to-day administration, that is the responsibility of the ministry headed by the minister and the permanent secretary. As it relates to employment issues and discipline issues, we much prefer that to be taken out of the remit of the political directorate, and that remains within the ambit of the Public Service Commission, the Deputy Governor, and the Governor. So for the Deputy Governor, for example, to be instructing Radio Montserrat directly without first going through the Permanent Secretary and without first having had the advice of the Minister with responsibility was not the right approach. And it is against that backdrop that I'm saying we are putting all of that to rest. We will ensure that the systems are in place to make sure that we do not have a recurrence of such a situation.